God will be here. Maybe I'll feel that presence. We go into this obsessive pursuit of a reality totally divorced from what gives life. As if it were some sort of Harry Potter spell that we could wave a wand and say, Wingardium Leviosa, and have that lifted from our shoulders. That puts the burden of freedom upon us. And that is not our job. It's God's job. And it's what Jesus is offering to those who were hearing Jesus' teaching in that day, and to those who hear those words repeated even now. The life that Jesus calls us to is a life rooted in the God of love and of life and of creativity. God whose love is always available and always flowing through our lives, even when we can't feel it. Whose yoke is fitting and whose burden is light. It's a life of freedom that is already wrapped around us, ready to be felt and experienced, ready to be breathed in and coursing through our veins, so that we can realize who and whose we are, and to realize our call to a life that is true freedom. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." God is always by our side until we are able to hear the divine voice calling our name, calling us into freedom, calling us into life. The founder of Methodism, John Wesley, called that prevenient grace. That grace that comes before we are able to really have any awareness of it. It's God's Spirit at work giving life in the midst of our human struggle, even before we can say yes to it. Like Jesus offering to the man at the pool that life of freedom, he said, "Do you wish to be made well?" You would think that the man would say, "Well, duh. Of course I want to be made well." But sometimes when we hear these shoulds and "you're just" and all of these other things that are so negative and dragging us down, we find ourselves living in this pattern of, that's all I've known, that's all I feel I deserve, and there's no other way for me. How difficult it must have been for that man after he was healed to get up and go and enter life and to work and engage in community when all he had known was sitting by the pool waiting for something to happen. When we are healed, it calls us to a responsibility of being in community, to being there for one another and to help lift the weights that others have had cast upon them. You may remember in the Gospel of Luke how Jesus gave a thumbnail sketch of his job description when he quoted from Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. God has sent me to proclaim release to the captive and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Sometimes all we know is our existence in the shame that has been placed upon us. But God's healing still comes to us. That fitting yoke, that light burden, still is being offered to us moment by moment, with every breath, with every heartbeat, until we wake up to the realization that in fact God is in our midst. And that God, who we met through these stories of Jesus Christ, walking around and offering all of these people these new opportunities at life, is for us too. The one whose yoke is fitting and whose burden is light. So I close with these words from Jan Richardson, who is a friend of mine from seminary, who wrote this prophet's blessing. This blessing finds its way behind the bars. This blessing works its way beneath the chains. This blessing knows its way through a broken heart. This blessing makes a way where there is none. Where there is no light, this blessing. Where there is no hope, this blessing. Where there is no peace, this blessing. Where there is nothing left, this blessing. In the presence of hate, in the absence of love, in the torment of pain, in the grip of fear, to the one in need, to the one in the cell, to the one in the dark, to the one in despair. Let this blessing come as bread. Let this blessing come as release. Let this blessing come as sight. Let this blessing come as freedom. Let this blessing come. Amen.